August 19th, 1981. The Gulf of Sidra, Mediterranean Sea. Two American fighter jets are patrolling the airspace when two Libyan Su-22 fitters blast through the clouds, charging straight at them. The Libyans don't issue a warning. They simply lock on and fire an infrared anti-aircraft missile. For the Americans, it is the ultimate test of reflex and engineering. The Libyan missile streaks through the sky, but the American jets violently whip out of its path. Within 60 seconds, the US pilots reverse the engagement, lock onto the Libyans, and erase both enemy jets from the sky with AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles. It was the first American aerial combat victory since the Vietnam War. The aircraft that achieved it didn't just win a dogfight, it sent a shockwave through the Soviet bloc. It was the Grumman F-14 Tomcat. For 30 years, it was the undisputed king of the aircraft carrier. It was a 20-ton monster with wings that moved, a radar that could see over the horizon, and a missile that could snipe an enemy from the next zip code. But the true story of the F-14 Tomcat isn't just about American dominance. It's a story of a system glitch that resulted in America's most iconic, patriotic fighter jet achieving its greatest, deadliest successes while being flown by America's bitterest enemy. To understand why the F-14 Tomcat was an absolute outlier of the Cold War, you have to understand the terrifying problem it was built to solve. In the late 1960s, the US Navy was having nightmares about Soviet strategic bombers. The Soviets had developed long-range bombers carrying massive anti-ship cruise missiles. If they got within 100 miles of a US aircraft carrier, they could sink it and start World War III. The Navy needed a shield. They needed a fighter that could launch from a carrier, loiter in the sky for hours, and kill Soviet bombers from unimaginably long distances before they could even drop their weapons. They didn't build a dogfighter, they built a flying sniper tower. The heart of the F-14 Tomcat wasn't its engines, it was its brain. The Hughes AWG-9 radar system was the most powerful fire control system ever put inside a fighter jet. It was so powerful, it could track 24 separate targets simultaneously. But tracking them was only half the equation. The other half was the AIM-54 Phoenix missile. The Phoenix was a 1,000-pound telephone pole packed with high explosives and its own internal radar. The Tomcat could fly at 30,000 feet, lock onto an enemy aircraft 125 miles away, and fire a Phoenix missile at Mach 5. The Tomcat could launch 6 of these missiles at 6 different targets at the exact same time. It was a capability that literally no other air force on Earth possessed. But putting a massive radar and 6 1,000-pound missiles onto a jet makes it incredibly heavy. To get a plane that heavy off the short deck of an aircraft carrier, it needed massive, wide wings for maximum lift. But to fly at Mach 2 to intercept a bomber, wide wings would rip the plane apart due to drag. Grumman engineers solved this with a mechanical cheat code, variable geometry wings. A complex onboard computer automatically swept the wings forward during takeoff, landing, and tight, low-speed dogfights. But as the pilot slammed the throttles forward and approached the speed of sound, the wings automatically swept backward into a sleek, dart-like delta shape. It was 2 entirely different aircraft mashed into one airframe. Throughout the 1980s, the Tomcat used this cheat code to absolutely humiliate the Libyan Air Force. In 1981, they shot down the 2 Su-22s. In 1986, they casually outmaneuvered Libyan MiG-25 Foxbats. And in 1989, 2 Tomcats from the USS John F. Kennedy completely dismantled 2 Libyan MiG-23s in a high-speed turning fight. The F-14 was untouchable. And then came the greatest historical irony of the 20th century. If you look at the record books, the US Navy shot down 5 enemy aircraft with the F-14 Tomcat. But the Tomcat is credited with roughly 70 aerial kills worldwide. How? Because of the Iranian glitch. In the mid-1970s, before the Iranian Revolution, Iran was a close ally of the United States. The Shah of Iran was terrified of Soviet MiG-25s flying reconnaissance missions over his country, so he wrote a massive check to Grumman and purchased 80 F-14 Tomcats and hundreds of top-secret Phoenix missiles. Then, in 1979, The Iranian Revolution overthrew the Shah. The US embassy was stormed, and overnight, America's greatest ally in the Middle East became its bitterest enemy. And they just happened to possess a fully operational fleet of America's most advanced, highly classified fighter jets. When the Iran-Iraq War broke out in 1980, the Iranian Air Force used the F-14 exactly as it was designed. They used the massive AWG-9 radar as an airborne warning system, and they used the Phoenix missiles to slaughter the Iraqi Air Force. Iranian F-14s scored up to 64 confirmed kills against Iraqi MiGs and Mirages. To this day, the Islamic Republic of Iran is the only country on Earth still flying the F-14 Tomcat. They are using 1970s American engineering to defend Iranian airspace in the 21st century. Back in the United States, the end of the Cold War almost killed the F-14. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the threat of massive Soviet bombers vanished overnight. Suddenly, a multi-million-dollar fleet defense interceptor seemed like an expensive dinosaur. The Navy was looking for an excuse to retire it, but the Tomcat refused to die. The engineers applied a hardware patch. They strapped the Lantern targeting pod to the Tomcat's belly. This pod allowed the F-14 to drop precision, laser-guided bombs. The ultimate long-range interceptor was instantly reborn as a precision strike bomber. The crews affectionately renamed it the Bombcat. Instead of shooting down Russian bombers over the ocean, the F-14 spent its twilight years dropping laser-guided ordnance on Taliban caves in Afghanistan and Iraqi bunkers during Operation Iraqi Freedom. It proved that a masterfully engineered airframe could adapt to an entirely different era of warfare. By 2006, the Tomcat was exhausted. The maintenance hours required to keep the complex swing-wing mechanisms and aging analog systems in the air were astronomical. The US Navy officially retired the F-14, replacing it with the highly reliable, multi-role F/A-18 Super Hornet. But the Tomcat's retirement came with a dark, final twist. Usually, when a legendary fighter jet retires, it is sold to allies, parked in museums, or sent to the famous Boneyard in the Arizona desert to be stored. But because Iran was still desperately flying their fleet of stolen Tomcats, they were constantly trying to smuggle spare parts out of the United States on the black market. To ensure their enemy could never get their hands on a single American bolt, radar dish, or wing sweep actuator, the US Department of Defense made a heartbreaking decision. They took dozens of retired, legendary F-14 Tomcats planes that had won the Cold War and defined a generation, and literally fed them into industrial shredders. They reduced millions of dollars of American history into unrecognizable scrap metal, just to starve the Iranian Air Force. The F-14 Tomcat was a masterpiece of Cold War engineering. It was a mechanical celebrity that looked like the future and fought like a demon. It was so perfectly designed that it accidentally armed our enemies, and it was so valuable that we had to destroy our own history just to keep it out of their hands. If the twisted, ironic history of the F-14 Tomcat changed how you see military aviation, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that the real, unpolished history of these machines deserves to be heard. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the archives. What do you think? Did the US Navy retire the F-14 Tomcat too soon? Or was the swing-wing technology just too expensive to keep flying? Let us know in the comments below.